really proud of my team because we spent so long thinking about our consent form and the way we were setting up in those early days. And it's really, again, we thought through a lot of this. So this is specifically one of the things that we thought through. So 23andMe does two things. One, we require a lot of saliva from our customers, specifically for privacy reasons. Like, we don't necessarily need that much saliva, but you can't accidentally drool that much saliva. You can't accidentally like fall asleep somewhere and swab it and stick it in and like and send it in and have it work. So we intentionally thought through to make sure that like when you spit, it's your spit. The second thing is that we don't allow people to upload data from a different source and see the DNA families, like the DNA relative finder. So we don't allow people to do that. So for instance, in the Golden State Killer example where they found a sample and they uploaded into the data set and they were able to see are there any family matches, we don't allow that for our customers. So we've set up we've set up how we structure the product and how we set up even the initial spitting in a lot of ways to make sure that it's like really you that have spat intentionally and that there's not going to be outside data sources that are put in there to see whether or not they are matching.
Does that ever weigh on you that you have the potential to help catch someone really bad?
I think that it's not our business. Like, we're really focused on the empowerment of the consumer. And wealth, your health area, your ancestry, identity, all of those things. GEDmatch, and there's other groups out there now that say they want to do that specifically as a business. That is not something that we are going to be pursuing.
In fact, you cut off API access recently.
The API actually is a totally separate issue, and that one is. It was a little, so again, we're coming out with a blog post that we'll put out about it. So we put out the API with this hope that like, oh, there's going to be all these companies that come and like the world of genetics, everything is going to be personalized. And kind of what we realized after years is that there's not a lot of people who understand genetics. And a lot of the big companies, like people don't yet understand exactly how we are going to personalize. And the quality, there's a number of the partners we had that are really interesting, but they don't meet our scientific bar. And
like what wine you should drink.
Wine, there's a lot of wellness nutrition that is just like, I'm uncomfortable with it. And a lot of the reason why we were okay with it is after the FDA, we couldn't return interpretations to people. So we felt like it was a better compromise to say, we're going to let you have access to all this other information, even though we know that there's some errors in it, but you're kind of, there's a level of independence that you have. You can go and actually get this different interpretations. But after BRCA came out, in some ways the scale tipped, because we're giving you a lot of the really valuable information, and then a lot of the information that people are getting from some of these other sources was causing a lot of concern, like medical concern. And then I think that, one of the things I've often said is that healthcare was the original fake news. And there's a lot of, it's easy to prey on people about a diet or a wellness. And there was some of the information and some of the, companies that had just a real lack of science that I was uncomfortable with. So it's not that we shut it off. It's that I'd say we're kind of doing a clean sweep. And we still do a lot of partnerships with academics. We do a lot of partnerships around research. So those all use the API. And we will keep doing partnerships with companies that meet our scientific criteria. But I think that customers, I feel really strongly about this. Like, it's really hard for people to necessarily know exactly what is real and what is fake. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we're providing access to like really good information. But when we know that something is intentionally sort of in the world of like fake news, like we need to make sure that we are actually providing like reality for people.
Right. Yeah. One last question for you. You continue to evolve as a company. You've from its beginnings and the spit tube test and telling us about various traits we have to now drug research. Where do you see 23andMe in the next 5-10 years? What's next?
I think I love my company. I love it so much. I think that I think about, again, for us, like one of the you talked about prevention, and I really think like one of the most interesting things we can do is help people live healthier and really understand prevention. If I go to my doctor, we're going to hear the exact same things. Like, exercise more, lose weight, don't smoke. And I think there's a huge opportunity of personalization. Like whether or not, like we're both in our 40s, like who should get a mammogram? Should I get a mammogram? Should you get a mammogram? Like, it's not the same for everyone. Like, not all 40-year-olds are the same. Not everyone has the same risk factor. So I think the next decade for me is about really crafting a world where we're truly looking at all the information about you and how can we actually help you live a more personalized life related to your health. So I think it's, again, that's why I said, like, I love the prevention space. There's so much potential, and again, no one really makes money on preventing diabetes, but I think it's, without a doubt, that is what our customers want, so we will provide it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so fun.
Thank you. Okay, so there is perhaps no category in the history of humankind that provides as much promise to us as AI. Our next guest is an expert in the field and, as an investor, has 13 unicorns in his portfolio, so he wins. Please welcome to the stage from Sinovation, Kai-Fu Lee, and our moderator, John Russell. Big round of applause.
Okay, hi everybody. And Kai-Fu, hi. Thank you so much for coming here. So the last time that we spoke together was Beijing, right?
That's
2 years ago.
At Crunch Beijing.
Yeah, so you guys have been pretty busy since then, right? So
Very busy.
earlier this year, you raised your latest fund,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So in total, I think it's about $1 billion US. Is that correct?
Yeah, we raise about $1 billion every 2.5 years. So we currently manage about $2 billion. We were smaller earlier.
Why is that you downsized?
Downsized? No,
Yeah.
we upsized.
Oh,
right?
sorry, upsized. So
Yeah, we started with like a $100 million fund. Now they're about $1 billion fund in dual currency, mostly because the entire Chinese entrepreneurial environment has been incredibly vibrant. A lot of great companies, and with great companies, with great entrepreneurs, the prices are higher. The new areas we could invest in. China was behind in many areas, so now we can use AI and mobile to reinvent education, clinics, retail, and all of those are just full of opportunities.
So you guys, and I think you just mentioned there, you have a dual currency fund, right? So you have one vehicle is US dollars,
Right.
and the other is obviously Chinese yuan, right?
Right.
What's the reason for that? Why do you do that?
Depends on where the entrepreneurs want to go public. So if they want to go public in US, NASDAQ, and NYSE, we take money from the US and European investors, and then they exit that way through the VIE structure. If they want to go public in China, then they take the Chinese investors' money, and we exit that way.
Oh, wow. So you have to ask them early on, right?
You have to choose.
So that means that you know a lot about which companies that you've got that aren't public right now, where they're going to go public, right? Maybe.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm just curious. So in terms of what we've seen over the last year, obviously it seems like the IPO window for Chinese companies is open.
Yes.
And the US is quite a popular route, right? Are you seeing that in the companies that you're working with? Obviously, without giving us
Sure.
info, unless you want to tell us. But
Oh, sure. I want to tell you everything. Well, most Chinese tech companies still want to see a U.S. exit. I think ringing that bell at the NASDAQ is still a dream for many people, and the American analysts are still the best in the world. So companies that do tech and do tech well, that aren't afraid to answer the hard questions, want to go public in the U.S. Although there is one near U.S. solution, which is a Hong Kong Stock Exchange.
Right.
And that's fluid with the same U.S. investment banks and investors too. So both are, we expect to see several in both New York as well as Hong Kong.
okay, and outside of China, so you also do deals here, right, in the US?
We do some deals here, yes.
So what are the kind of companies that you're seeking out here?
Mostly pure core technology companies that might be able to go into China or have a China angle or license their technology to China, because our value add is clearly the China side. The top tech investors would likely if they choose us, it would be because of our extensive China expertise. So robotics, sensors, AI would be our core investments here, some education as well.
Okay, and in terms of what sort of stage do you kind of aim to get in on those deals?
Both Series A and B, both US and China. But really, our 95% of our money is deployed in China. So
Yeah.
US is just more of an outpost to learn and maybe take some entrepreneurs and help them get more business in China.
And I know that we spoke about this previously as and when you guys announced the fund, but you mentioned that you were keen to do more here in the US, right? What are you sort of doing here in terms of trying to build your profile here and doing other things?
Well, I think U.S. is clearly, and Silicon Valley is the world's mecca for the most brilliant technologists. So we're looking to create relationships. Some would invest in us, some we get to invest in, some are just partnerships. And we exchange knowledge is very important. Sand Hill Road has a lot of knowledge about what's hot in the U.S., and that's helpful to us. But we also think China has become a parallel universe where a lot of the best business practices, if launched in the US, could be great companies. So we exchange a lot of information with our VC friends in the US about how to help American startups using the Chinese playbook. And then, of course, the reverse has always been used, the Silicon Valley playbook applied to China.
Yeah, right. So in terms of AI, which is obviously is your area that you're particularly focused on, and you're obviously known for that too. Yeah. In terms of the companies that are out there in the AI space, it seems like the biggest ones are in China at this point, right? Why is that?
Well, because I think I've been working on AI for 38 years, since my sophomore.
Quite a long time.
Since I was in college, sophomore.
Right.
On natural language processing, speech, computer vision. And finally, it's come to fruition that AI is applicable. But I think people assume because the US is so strong in AI research, US should dominate. But actually, China is catching up really fast. And I outlined this in my book, AI Superpowers, which comes out this month. And it's describing China's magical ascent in the space of AI just in 2 years. Coming from way behind, now it is actually ahead of the US in AI implementation. And AI, we should think of it as electricity, right? Thomas Edison and also the AI deep learning inventors were American. They invented the stuff, and then they generously shared it. And now China, as the largest marketplace with the largest amount of data, is really using AI to find every way to add value to traditional businesses, to internet, to all kinds of spaces. And the Chinese entrepreneurial ecosystem is huge. So today, the most valuable AI companies in computer vision, speech recognition, drones are all Chinese companies. Their sales are larger, their market cap is higher. The more VC invest in AI than in the US. 48% China, 43% of the world's AI investments are in China today. We have created 5 unicorns in AI in the past 4 years. And these are companies that were founded between 2 to 4 years ago.
Wow.
So this is really how fast it's been. You have to be there to see the excitement and the pace.
So, but it also seems, I mean, that's incredible, and the fact that there's more data out there in China that you can get hold of to use, and there's application-wise there are more areas, right, where these companies can do things. But also it borders on, I mean, there's a lot of good things there. There's also some areas that are a bit, unsure, right? And there's been a lot of media coverage about some of the ways that the government is using data against, some of the people that are living in China. Does that concern you in some way? I know one of the companies, Face right, that is in your sort of stable. They're involved in working with the government to help, find people, and there's an angle that could be used in a more perhaps sinister way. What's your take on that?
Well, we are an investor, and we invest in technology companies, and technology companies have lots of customers. So Face++ is one of our 45 companies, and they serve the financial sector, education sector, healthcare. They're part of smart city. They're part of preventive maintenance of older people from falling down in the hospitals. They are also part of government procurement to use the technology for arresting criminals and terrorists in airports. And the use of computer vision is more in the Chinese government than probably than the U.S. government. But then there's also, you know, UK and Israel and other countries that use these technologies more.
Yeah,
I think just calling it sinister is probably too extreme.
Well, there's the potential for it to be sinister, right, in China.
Every technology has the potential to be sinister in any country. I really don't think you can point finger at one country that way.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I agree with you on that one, but okay, understand. Okay, and just one point that I really want to get to is the way that you guys work as a fund, because you have a very different take on tech, right? Mm-hmm. So inside the fund, you actually have your own institute, right? That's what you guys call it. So can you explain to the audience like what that actually is?
Yeah, I think in China, the execution is so fast that we love to invest in all these companies in AI, but sometimes we see some opportunities that no one's working on, and it's such a pity. So we decided we would hire engineers, and then we would look for the best opportunities to apply them. I think in these cases, you can hold us accountable for picking applications that are clearly for human good. So the types of applications that our AI companies have looked at, including manufacturing to reduce cost, insurance to give better service to people and reduce fraudulent claims, retail to create better sales forecasts. And we're now looking at healthcare, cancer, and we're also looking at education as a way to take a lot of what teachers do that are repetitive and routine, like grading homeworks, taking attendance, that could be done automatically.
But I mean, in terms of the team that you have internally, right? So what sort of size is that team? Because I think it's quite normal that the VC firms have tech people in a team, right, to work with their companies. But you guys are taking that a bit further, right? So how many people do you have?
We have about 200. 200
people working on tech in a VC firm. That's quite interesting. So what are they actually doing? And is it like sinister stuff or?
I told you.
I know. It's making sense now.
Education, healthcare, fighting cancer.
So they're building these products.
Yeah.
Internally.
Think of this as the Google 20% time, right? So we give them ideas of what areas of business that we think will tip, and then they build algorithms. And then when they show something, and then we talk to a lot of traditional industries that say, well, we could use that in our hospital, we could use that in our retail store, and then we'll do some contracts, and when we start to see something go from a solution to a product, we can then put money behind it, and then it becomes a bona fide company.
Right, and you just did that, right?
We did one spin-off, yeah.
So which is, what's the company, what do they do?
The company is called AI Innovation, mixing the word AI and innovation, and they do AI solutions for retail, insurance, and manufacturing.
Okay, and so that was a company that was started internally, and then you've spun it out and you've given it funding. Do you also work with other VCs to put money in?
Yes, usually another VC would set the price so we can avoid conflict of interest.
Okay, and then other work you do, so the team of 200 people, that's so many people working at a VC firm is kind of crazy, but they also do other stuff, right?
You know, this is China scale. Like, take Meituan as an example. People call them the Groupon, Open Table, Yelp of China.
App, right?
And they have 600,000 people doing deliveries. And they drive down the price of delivery to like 70 cents per order. And the Chinese way is to really take a large number of people and use them to operationalize and perfect and get the process right. So we have 200 engineers. When we spin off, we're now left with 30. Then we grow it to 200 again. Then we do another spin-off.
So you're saying 200 people is not that many people to have, basically?
Not at all.
So what's the target?
Well,
thousands?
as many as we can hire, and they have to be hired with leaders. They can't all be new grads, but a lot of them are new grads.
And do you, I mean, are you seeing this kind of model potentially happening here?
I don't think
US?
so. I don't think so. I think the Chinese model are truly different. You look at Meituan and how it's different from the Yelp and Groupon. Look at Didi, it's getting very different from Uber. You look at Tencent, it's quite different from Facebook. So like in my book, AI Superpowers, I also describe how China has bifurcated to an entirely different approach that is doing tech the heavy way, maximizing efficiency, producing the maximum gain, and use a highly competitive, what I call gladiatorial environment, which pushes everybody to be the best they can be and end up with completely different business models than the US. If you look at China now, there are also new innovations coming out that don't exist here. If you look at Ant Financial, a $200 billion company, Pinduoduo, a $25 billion company, the companies we invested in like VIPKid and Mobike, they don't exist in the US. They were China first. So I think TechCrunch should encourage everybody to really study how the Chinese entrepreneurs are coming up with these different models.
So we should also mention that you have a Q&A and a book signing as well, right? At some,
Yes.
3 or 4 p.m., I think. They told me backstage, but I can't remember. But it's on the agenda, so you'll be answering more of these questions about the differences between...
I'll be happy to take any questions from entrepreneurs, VCs, media during a Q&A session.
And you're signing a book that doesn't exist at the moment. That's some kind of AI craziness. Right?
We have an AI way to sign the book when the book doesn't exist. Come and find out how we do that.
Well, that's an amazing pitch. Okay, and you gave me the perfect segue into the final piece of the talk, right? Which is about U.S. companies in China. So obviously, Google, a company that you know pretty well. You were the head of China for Google. It's some time ago, right? It's almost 10 years ago that you left.
Yeah, I left 9 years ago. Yeah.
But what do you think of these apparent plans that Google has to launch new products in the Chinese market? Why are they doing that?
Well, first, I'm a huge fan of Google. I love the products, I love the culture, and I really will remember very fondly the 4 years that I worked there, and we actually became a company that thought could prove American companies could succeed in China.
How did that go, though, in the end?
Well, when I left, we had a much higher market share than when I joined. We went from 9% to 24%, making progress, and the revenue was approaching $1 billion, so it was pretty good. But afterwards, they made certain decisions to pull out, when I understand their decisions. But regarding their possible re-entry, I think re-entry is always difficult because either you're acknowledging what you did earlier was not right, or you're not. And either way, there's some trickiness to it. But I think the bigger issue really is, can an American multinational succeed in China? Now that China has bifurcated into this parallel universe, the entire dynamics are different. People aren't looking for another search engine or an app store. New companies are emerging, addressing previously unknown customer needs. Innovations are coming out. The new grads generally prefer to work for Chinese companies. And then lastly, the heads of multinationals are really just professional managers. And if they were to compete against local entrepreneurs who are gladiators in this coliseum, I don't think the American companies will have a high chance of succeeding in this environment. Although I wish Google the best. I think they have as good a product as anybody. They should have a higher chance than any other company, but it's going to be tough.
But I mean, it's not only Google, right? Because there's these stories about that Facebook tried to register a business, to operate there too. I mean, it seems like they either they don't read the news or they don't understand that they're going to have these armies of people like checking content, and it's not an easy thing, right? To have the very unique take in China where you can't publish certain things on.
I don't really know what happened with the Facebook situation. I know both Facebook and Google want to find a way in because China is the world's largest market. And I think the fundamental issue isn't a government issue, it's a competitiveness issue.
Right.
And I'm really not saying American companies are not good enough to win in China. If you take any Chinese company, you know, Alibaba, Tencent, Toutiao, Didi, the best, and say you go build an American subsidiary and try to win, I think that's equally unlikely to succeed.
So so obviously back when you were with Google, you thought that there was that chance that you could build a product, right, that could compete with Baidu on search or on maps, right? But now that's not really possible, you think?
I think building a competitive product, if you just look at the product feature, is obviously possible. I think Google has a phenomenal, the world's best search ranking algorithm. But it's also about branding, user expectations. You know, search isn't the hottest thing anymore, so who's building the next app? And can you fight with the equal tenacity and methods of local competitors? Are you incenting your team the same way that a Chinese company is? Or is there a glass ceiling for the heads of the groups? So there are all these complex issues that I think any American company would have a hard time in China. Now, Apple being the single exception, and I think that's because they're mostly a hardware product, and the product it's just become a fashion symbol. So that's different.
Great. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I mean, I could ask you so many more questions, but obviously you're going to be here for that Q&A and the book signing, so we can hear more from you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, just a quick reminder for some of the housekeeping stuff. #TCDisrupt. You know where to find the Startup Alley in the next stage, hopefully. Raise your hand if you know what's up with the layout. 0 people. All right, there are volunteers all around wearing green shirts that say, "Ask me, I can help." So just do that, follow those instructions. And also otter.ai. If you want to get transcripts of any of these chats, just go on to otter.ai, use the code TechCrunch, log in, register, and everything's happening in real time there. So you have quote for quote. And with that, I'm going to bring up our next guests. Please get excited, because I am. From Sound Ventures, please welcome Effie Epstein and Ashton Kutcher.
Nice to see each other again.
Sup, yeah.
Hello,
Thank you
people.
so much.
We shake hands like we haven't been talking for the last 30 minutes. Okay.
It's a weird talk show habit.
I know, right?
Like you have to shake the host hand, otherwise they're like, oh, there's some tension.
Yeah, like
And then you got to break it.
they've
But
been
you told us
fighting.
backstage you're a hugger. I was waiting for a hug, but I never got one, so.
I hugged you?
Yeah.
Wow, you're out here lying already. Oh my God. Okay, no, let's all start off on a better foot. For those of you that don't know, Effie Epstein is the managing partner at Sound Ventures. She was at Clear before iHeart, Marcia McClellan. Hopefully you know who this guy is. Ashton Kutcher is an angel investor, A-Grade Investments, founder of Sound Ventures with investments in Bird, Acorns, Lemonade, Robinhood, and the list goes on. Very excited to have you guys here. I'm going to start with you, Effie. I
Okay,
think
great.
all of us are really familiar with Ashton, the entertainer. And in the community here in Silicon Valley, definitely he's made his presence known. There are a lot of people who do know what he's all about, but I think there are a lot of people who have no idea what Ashton the investor is like.
Yeah.
How would you describe Ashton in a pitch meeting?
Definitely our secret weapon, and not for the reason that I think most people would think. I can speak to my own experience when I first met both Ashton and Guy. I was floored by how scary smart they were. I think where they are both excellent is taking away all the noise around, and they have a bullshit meter that's higher than I've ever seen. And so that's something that's super valuable for us as investors, of course, but scary smart, analytical, able to piece signals together from the market. And for me in my career, I've been completely industry agnostic. I've always followed the people, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So first of all, working with them, and then backing great entrepreneurs.
You said signals from the market, and I know that you guys have a little bit of a flexible investment strategy. got your ear to the ground.
Yeah.
What signals is the market sending now to either?
So I think like generally as a firm, we try to stay as agile as we can. I think a lot of firms have a tendency to set up variable guardrails around the things that they invest in and when they invest and how they invest and what stage they invest and everything else. And I think for us to be agile and opportunistic is really important, because I think in general, the next great idea is going to be in a sector that you can't lay out in a PowerPoint presentation to your LPs or even to your team, because generally the sector becomes created by the next great company that's going to come along. So, to me, that question sort of falls into the trappings of what is X, right? And to know what X is before you see X as an investor is often really hard, right? Like, because I don't think you could anticipate the changes Airbnb created in the travel and leisure area. I don't think you could have anticipated that there was going to be a great disruption in transportation when the great disruption in transportation came. And so I think, the biggest thing that we try to do as a firm is stay open to the notion that the next great change isn't going to fall perfectly into a PowerPoint. We're seeing a pretty big burst of companies around D2C space, where people are coming up with some product that's a little fudgy and been around forever, and trying to rely completely on brand as a differentiation going to market and direct to consumer. Like, a lot of those companies are going to stumble because there's an assumption that they have some advantage just because they know how to engineer Instagram, and suddenly they're going to win because of that. But there are some companies in that space that actually do have a market wedge and some ability to actually create consumer traction that will ultimately deliver a cohort that sticks around for a while, and probably some network effects that they can create inside of that. So that's one space in particular that we're seeing a lot of advances in.
Yeah. I think generally, sound takes a very broad market approach, and we tend to look for the intangibles. And for us, some of those are what's scary to people, what's a little bit uncomfortable to think about as an idea or to have a conversation around. How does constraint breed creativity? That's something that we look at a lot. Where's the talent going? That's been, a core part of our strategy now for years, is looking where people are going in terms of industry sectors, companies. And so for us, as a firm, we'll never be industry or sector specific. It'll always be a broad market approach based on these intangibles.
Well, and on the one hand, you can't anticipate certain things, but then your job is also to anticipate certain things.
Or see a good thing when it comes along.
Yeah.
Identify quickly.
The truth is, if you really, if you're in it for the money, you're going to go build something. And if you know what the next turn is, you'll go build it, and you'll make a lot more money than you will just investing in it, right? Because you're the founder, and you'll have stake in it and everything else. So if I knew what the next thing is, I'd go build it tomorrow, right? But our job as investors isn't to necessarily know what the next big thing is to be able to identify it when you see it. And, so much of that comes down to who's the person building it? What is their strategic advantage? What do they know that nobody else in the world knows? What do they have? What understanding do they have that's deep? So, we can look out and go, okay, so if you think that companies that are building technology platforms and have a robust database, if you think that they deserve a 20x multiple relative to companies that don't have that historically over the last 10 years, you can look at a company that has some AI capabilities and probably deserves a 100x multiple if they actually have the appropriate data to run their training sets against. So I could look at AI and I could go, yeah, AI is the next big thing. Well, okay, great. There's every person that sits down with you is like, well, we're building AI and then once you start unpacking it, you go, that's actually not AI. You just are running an algorithm on a database.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever, you're talking about, if I know what the next big thing is, I just go out and build it. There's a contagion of Silicon Valley where you see people building things, becoming successful, and people want to do that. And you're around it all the time. Do you ever catch the bug a little bit and want to build something, be an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
That's a yes.
Yes. It's, of course you do, and then you have to sort of, it's hard to run the same rigor against your own ideas as you can run against somebody else's idea. Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to be a judge on American Idol than to stand up and sing in front of everybody. So running the same rigorous process against your own ideas and what you should build is really hard to do. And so I think when we have those bright ideas that we think about building, like the first person I'm going to go to is Effie and go, all right, Effie, tell me what's wrong with this and tell me why we shouldn't build this. And I think that keeps you from building a lot of things that maybe you shouldn't build.
Okay. So let's
Sounds
talk
about right.
geography a little bit. I know you grew up in Iowa. You were born in Israel?
In Israel, that's right.
Yeah. So outside of the big three, LA, San Francisco, New York, what is the most promising market?
Yeah, for us, from a pipeline perspective, what's interesting is we've seen some of the usual suspects been in our pipeline for a long time. Boston is a great feeder.
Robotic.
Austin has really been ticking up for us. We have a couple of companies out of Miami. That's been a ticking market as well. We're in Nashville next week judging a WeWork Creator Awards competition, a pitch competition. So those are a few of the cities that have emerged. Seattle has always been in the background. I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more out of Seattle. But I would say Denver, Austin, and shockingly Miami have been climbing up the ranks.
Yeah, I was in Denver last week looking at an extraordinary company there. I think the cool thing that's really happening is the democratization of a lot of just baseline software tools is actually allowing companies to actually start to spurt up in other places. We actually ran a market analysis on company culture. And what we did was we thought, most likely the next greatest companies in the world are going to be the companies where the most talented people want to work at. Like, even if you don't necessarily understand what the business looks like today, if this is a company that's attracting the most talented people around the world,
They're going to figure it out.
They're probably going to figure it out, right? And so we started running, we were pulling a bunch of different data sources to figure out where talent wanted to go, like what companies they wanted to work at. And there were two things that were super interesting that came up. There were a lot of companies that weren't here or New York, which was great for us because we started to see companies in other markets. There were a ton of female-founded companies, which I thought was outstanding and really exciting. And one of the biggest things relative to those companies being in different markets was they could attract talent at similar to lower prices because the cost of living was lower. And so suddenly people could have better lives working at companies, working on hard problems to solve, to make the world a better place, but actually have a life while they were doing that.
How long do you think it'll take for people to realize that LA is a better market than San Francisco?
They're already realizing it, I think.
I don't know. Is it a better market? I don't know.
Depends how you define better.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Is it
Better.
Listen, I think for us, what we've seen is, in the last 3 years, venture capital going into LA has more than doubled. Number of companies that have been funded has doubled. Number of exits has stayed the same, which is interesting. But I think for the first time, talent in LA, and specifically technical talent, has more options. And so the market as a whole is able to retain that talent in LA. In the past, we've had capital, and we've had great lifestyle and cost of living associated with that, but we haven't been able to retain the talent. And I think that's the biggest piece of the evolution I've seen is when companies are actually relocating entire engineering teams from up north to LA, that's a signal.
Yeah, I think the market in 2013, there was $1 billion of venture that went into companies. Last year, there was $7 billion that went in Los Angeles, but like Effie said, there were 68 exits in 2015, 63 in 16, and like 68 and 18. So, it'll probably take a while for the market to mature, and it'll take a while. I think one of the biggest trends that has to change is historically it's been tech companies acquiring tech companies, and tech companies actually realizing and understanding the value of tech companies when they acquire them, so they actually pay a market premium relative to it. And so getting media companies to actually do that again You know, there was a moment when MySpace got acquired and everyone went, oh, okay, everybody's getting in the game, and then that didn't go very well, and I think that there's been a lot of apprehension around that and actually paying those prices relative to exits. But I think as that continues to happen, the ecosystem will only get stronger, and there will be more talent in the area, and it'll continue to build. There's a little bit of a void of sort of hubs for people to really get together and, you know, stress test ideas.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys was around, Effie, I was reading an article where you said that female founders tend to be more conservative and undersell their valuation, whereas men come in and they could have the same exact pitch, and instead of being worth $2 billion, it's worth $20 billion, which is great. Who's right? Like, when you're hearing these pitches, what is more attractive to you? Someone who's more conservative and actually like feels a little bit more humble about their reach, or someone who is coming in and saying, I'm going to take over the world?
Right. I think that this really goes to the ethos of the investor. I mean, for us, any day we'd rather see a company exceed their projections and budget than miss. And it's a trend that we follow very closely with our companies. There is definitely a balance between confidence and cockiness in pitching. I think it's something real that we see, and you know, not to provide blanket statements, but as a whole, absolutely, I see women being more conservative in their pitches than we do with male founders. The music to my ears, whether someone is presenting me a $2 billion TAM or $20 billion TAM, is the words, I'm not sure, I need to test. For me, I'm always looking for those signals in an entrepreneur to say, I want to learn, I want to iterate, and I want to listen to smart people around me. I'm very clear on my vision and where I want to take this company. But those are the signals that we look for more than a TAM. I mean, you can slap any number on that page. It doesn't mean anything, is the reality. We need to believe first and foremost in that person sitting in front of us. And so that's what you're selling. You're selling yourself, you're selling your team and your vision. So those are the things that we tend to focus on the most.
Well, and another thing that I heard was that you guys are really interested in storytelling. Ashton, you in particular. So you have to be a good storyteller. You are a communicator by trade. Do you feel like you're ever missing out? Because not everyone is a great storyteller. Doesn't mean that doesn't mean they don't have a great business.
So I think, you know, one of the critical tests that I try to run when I'm sitting across from a founder is, can you sell me your idea, right? Like, because if you can't sell me, how are you going to sell your first hire, your second hire, your third hire? How are you going to actually create the capacity for the rest of your team to sell those next hires? Like, especially early stage companies, generally the CEO of the company has to hire the first, you know, call it 40 people, and they should hire the first 40, 50 people. And if you're competing for the best talent in the world, and you can't sell your idea to the best talent in the world, how are you going to actually get all A players around you to actually turn this into an explosive company? Right. So I look at it as a giant. If they can't sell me, if at the end of the conversation I'm not thinking, man, should I leave Los Angeles and go work for this company? Like, what they're doing is genuinely impactful for the world. It's going to make life better for human beings. And I want to work with that person every day. Like, because once I invest in the company, I'm going to work for them every day for the next 10 years, likely. So if you can't sell me to work for you, basically, then how are you going to sell your first 50 employees, right? And then on the other side, you know, it's also sort of a job interview. Do I want to hire that person? Like, and so you're sort of playing those two games in your mind where you're going, would I hire this person, and do I want to work for this person? Because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to end up doing if you invest. So right. I think that storytelling piece it has to happen. And then you can refine it and make it better and improve it and figure out how to communicate to a consumer over time. But you know, early stage companies, that person has to be able to do all of those things.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Effie, I know that you coached a lot of the companies personally during the Perfect Pitch in Austin. Like, what tips do you have for, there's so many, raise your hand if you are a founder, entrepreneur. So everyone.
Yeah.
What's your advice?
Yes, absolutely. I think the key is being very clear and succinct on your vision. Your goal in investor meeting, especially a preliminary one, is to pique their interest. So why are you building the thing that you're building? How do you prove that you are the right person to build that? And being clear on your vision. And the reason being is when I listen to someone's vision, I'm not just looking at the market opportunity behind it. I'm saying, okay, are they going to be able to get their entire workforce and team behind that vision? Are they going to be able to get customers and clients behind that vision? So to me, that's something really critical. And I can share with this audience the 3 things that we look for in founders, regardless of the industry or business that you're building, is grit, self-awareness, and followership. I would say we're very fortunate to see great entrepreneurs every day. We find that there's nuance between the good entrepreneurs and the exceptional ones. Most entrepreneurs who come into our doors have grit, right? They have the perseverance to go kind of run through doors. I would say less have self-awareness. If you can show an investor that you recognize where some of your blind spots are, that's critical because to me it shows you'll know how to fill those gaps in your organization. And then lastly is followership, so being able to attract and retain people who are smarter, better, and sometimes more seasoned or senior than you. So to me that's a huge part of the story. So pique their interest about the vision, be clear, but also explain why you're the right person to run this company.
Okay, we're going to switch gears just a touch. Ashton, you have been in Hollywood for a really long time and now become very embedded here in Silicon Valley, which gives you an interesting vantage point when it comes to the Me Too movement. I'm just curious about your perspective, given that you've been in both worlds.
You know, I think it's, you know what, so the best advice that I got relative to this entire thing came from my wife, and she said, men have had hundreds of years to solve this problem and to talk about this and figure it out, and it's probably the best thing at this point for men to just shut up and listen for a little bit. So I actually think that anything I say is ultimately a hollow action, and that the only thing that it is for me to do is to actually do, and that anything else in between is bullshit. So hire more women, get busy making sure that there's equal pay within organizations, that the companies that we invest in are thinking about this problem on day one, and continue to tell stories about the extraordinary women in history and in the world and going forward. I think like that's my baseline of what needs to be done. And so in doing so, it's incumbent upon me to have my investment fund be 50% women, to increase the number of companies that we fund that are female founded. It's incumbent upon me to make sure that my foundation is already 80% women, and every position in the C-suite is all women. My media company is over 50%, I think it's like 70% women, and all the people in the C-suites are women in my media company. And now I'm going to shut up, and I'll hand it to Effie to actually like say what needs to be, what else could be done.
And your fund is, right now, of female founders, is it 30%? Is that what?
That's right. So over the last 18 months, 30% of the companies that we funded have been female founders. But I think it's important to emphasize these are phenomenal businesses, ones that we see as 100x opportunities, and they happen to be founded by women.
Right.
We don't need to, in any way, change our investment strategy. We just need to open up our pipeline so we see those opportunities, because they're there.
Awesome. Let's talk about Twitter for a second. You were the first, Ashton, to reach 1 million followers on Twitter. There was a time when you were interested in investing in them. For a brief period, you left Twitter. Now you're back. If you were on the board, let's say you had...
I never left Twitter.
After the Paterno tweet?
Oh, no. I actually just started, asking somebody next to me, you
read
think this is okay to tweet? Yeah, just, not assume... Well, I think that was a specific inflection point where there were so many media companies that were following people's Twitter that it no longer became a private conversation. Everything was public. So if you made a mistake, you were screwed. You were publicly lambasted. And so at that point, I was like, well, before I tweet something, I'm just going to say that, hey, what do you think of this to whoever's next to me?
Okay, so to correct.
Yeah.
Further filtered your
Further
Twitter.
filtered, exactly.
But let's say that you had made the investment in Twitter and you were on the board. What would you be telling Jack right now?
Oh, that's a great question.
Thank you. They paid me.
Oh, what would I tell Jack? I emailed him 5 months ago, and I was like, I just said, I'd love to be able to actually segment my audience, and I don't think that everybody that is following me on Twitter wants to hear about what companies I'm interested in investing in or have invested in. I don't think everybody that follows me on Twitter wants to know about The Ranch on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, it's a great show. I don't think that everybody wants to hear what my political views are. I don't think that everybody, I was like, wouldn't it be a better experience if you could actually segment your audience towards interest base that would then filter your feed, and you could actually self-filter your feed as you posted. So eliminate the presumption that everybody wants to hear what you have to say about everything, because I just don't think that's the case. So that would be my advice.
Okay, perfect. I hope he takes it. I like that idea. I've not actually heard that. Another one I have is around a portfolio company that you're actually invested in, not hypothetically. Bird. Okay, one person took a scooter here. As an investor in Uber, you were there for all of the kind of regulatory hurdles and watched that unfold, and they very much had a ask for forgiveness, not permission approach. Bird has done a similar thing, but the environment is different in that it was really Uber versus the government, and in this case, Bird is not only dealing with the government, but also the public and the citizens have strong feelings. So are they playing it right?
Yeah, I think they're playing it exactly right. So fundamentally, what's the Uber thing was very frustrating the whole way through as well. The Airbnb thing, regulatory-wise, has been incredibly frustrating the whole way through. Bird, to me, this is like the simplest one of them all, in so much as nobody wakes up in the morning, opens their front door, and looks outside and goes, God, look at how many cars there are parked everywhere.
Yeah.
They're fucking parked everywhere. There are cars parked everywhere. It's ridiculous. And they're clogging up the roads. They're making it impossible to get anywhere you want to go. But boy, do we open up the door and go, man, there are just scooters all over the place. And you're like, hold on, wait a second. This is just aversion to change, right? And suddenly we go, all right, we have to regulate the hell out of this because people are complaining about there being scooters. But nobody's complaining about the fact that there are cars everywhere. And if you think about like a pure square foot perspective of how much space a scooter takes up relative to a car, this is absurd, right? And fine, I understand. Like maybe we can find appropriate parking places for these things and everything else. But the regulatory function on this, like if you're like in any position that you're looking at this and thinking about it, open up your door and look at how many cars are outside. And you're just used to it, right? This is just something you're not used to. And so there's certainly ways that we can get places where these things can be parked that people are comfortable with and everything else. But boy, it's just a better world if this takes off and works. Like from an energy consumption level, it's going to be a much better world. From an emissions perspective, it's going to be a better world. And from a people just getting where they need to go, it's just going to be a better world if we actually pull this off. So, I can advocate all of this for Bird, and I can advocate this for all of this for every scooter company. Let the battle be between these companies, but don't make the battle about like suppressing the freedom of your citizens or suppressing the ability for us to actually make the world a better place where people can get where we want to go. Like that's not serving anyone. So that's my message to regulators.
Oh, boom, mic drop. If only it wasn't strapped to your face. I am cutting into your break, but I have one more question. So. You came from the world of entertainment to be a VC and have definitely proven yourself. There's so many celebrities, NBA players, athletes, people who have made their money in the entertainment world and now want to come be a part of the new gold rush in Silicon Valley.
what advice do you have for those people as someone who's done it?
You know, so there are a lot of, you know, wannabe entrepreneurs that are trying to build companies, and there are just as many wannabe investors that are trying to become investors. And so I don't really have that much advice for those folks other than, like, if you want to have a job, you got to do the work. And it really comes down to a function of, I mean, I was at TechCrunch 50 a decade ago, and I've probably been in the Valley, and I've probably, in the course of the last 10 years, I can't even imagine how many pitch decks and companies I've looked at, and founders that I've worked with. Said that, like, I've been to every YC demo day every 6 months for the last 10 years. You can't build pattern recognition by looking at something 10 times. And if you're an investor, the one point of leverage you really have is building pattern recognition and being able to see what does a great entrepreneur look like, what's a differentiated idea, what's the defensibility of this company, what are the moats that they're creating over time, where's their expertise, are they going to get people to rally around them, like, how are they creating efficiencies in the marketplace, what does the competitive landscape look like, all of those things. You know, you can see a great idea and be like, wow, that's a great idea, and you seem like a really good person, but if you don't have an understanding of what a competitive landscape looks like, you can be gobbled up in like a minute, and all of a sudden your cash is out the door. So the bottom line, it's just like anything else. Like, if you want to have a job, you got to do the work, and it takes time and a ton of mistakes. And, you know, the truth is, the value I've added as a celebrity investor compared to the value I've added as an investor, I don't even think that they're on the same map. Like, and so my only recommendation to people is, like, if you want to do it, you got to do the work, and you're going to lose money most of the time, and occasionally you'll find something that's unbelievable, and you might be able to make money.
All right, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I could stay, but they'd yell at me. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to break. Please don't do this. We're going to break. See you guys at 1 p.m. 1 p.m. on the dot. Thank you.
Space is not a destination. It's not a tourist attraction or a delivery route. And we know it's not a race because last we looked, there is no finish line. Despite what others may say, space is not a place to go. Space is a place to do. A place to do big things, important things, useful things, epic things. Things that help militaries protect better. Things that help humans communicate better. Things that teach us about other worlds. And about how we can better protect the one we live in now. There's an asteroid up there that may reveal the secrets of the universe if we can bring home a piece of it. Let's do that. We won't need to launch satellites anymore if we can 3D print them up there. Let's do that. There are terabytes of data that must be turned into vital information. Let's do that too. Let's solve the world's biggest problems. Let's invite the bold and the brilliant to join us. Let's unleash the best engineers on and off Earth. Because doing is what we do.
4 years ago, we were traveling in Colombia, Evan and I, We ran out of battery, we were stranded in the middle of Bogota, it was late at night. Ev ingeniously MacGyvered together a prototype of this product on the spot, and we were able to take charge from 2 AA batteries and put it into our phone. We wanted to make a product that could live on your keychain and give you options when you're in these tight situations. Sidekick is very much about letting you make that emergency call rather than watch that long YouTube video.
So the first feature of Sidekick is the internal battery. So if we take the cable out and then plug this into your phone, and so you can see there we've started charging. So this is good for about 2 hours talk time. So the second feature of Sidekick, and this is probably the biggest differentiator, is that you can use Sidekick with D batteries that you can pick up at a convenience store if you're really stuck. And then we complete the circuit using a magnetic bridge cover. And then we plug that into your phone. And there we go, you're up. The other feature of Sidekick is it also functions as a cable. So if you're at your friend's house and say they're an iPhone user, an Android user, or vice versa, you've always got a cable on you. So let's try this oscilloscope that we've set up here. And there you go, you can see we're charging from the oscilloscope. And if you're in a real emergency, and I mean real emergency, Sidekick also has a bottle opener. Cheers.
And because this is an everyday carry that you can have on you all the time, we wanted to bundle in other useful features that could help you out in different situations. So we've bundled in up to 128 gigabyte of storage, which you can use as a thumb drive, or you can plug into your phone and back up photos, videos, if you need it. But the journey for Flint2 doesn't stop here. We've got a range of other products that can help fulfill your charge cycle.
RagTag takes the hassle out of lost property for parents. Basically, the way that it works is smart tags come attached to your uniforms at school, and it means that whenever anything goes in lost property, mum or dad simply receive a text message that lets them know where the item is and that they can come and pick it up. We started beginning of 2016. We launched our product in about May, brought on 5 early adopter schools, which were absolutely fantastic. They gave us a huge amount of feedback at the start. And since then, we've raised $600K in a seed round, and we've hired a number of staff which have helped us expand to over 100 schools in Australia. We've partnered with a massive uniform wholesaler and distributor in Australia. They're managing all of our distribution for us, and in return they're paying us a fee for all of the tags and the service that we're providing. And they're actually using our product as a unique selling proposition, which is putting them way beyond all of the other players in the market.
The UK is the next market, and other markets with school uniforms where RagTag is heading next. But we think there's a huge untapped market for dependent lost property technology, because let's face it, they're the areas of society that lose their stuff the most and have the most trouble finding it. We do require a sensor at the lost property area. It's an RFID, UHF RFID sensor that's on the wall. For institutions like schools and aged care, it's really important to make it affordable. So in fact, when we rolled out in Australia and in the UK and other territories, that sensor is free for the school. Because parents across society, a whole bunch of different socioeconomic levels, that tag needed to be affordable for all of them. So that's our challenge, is to make sure it's affordable enough for every family so that we do become a household name.
Snapchat is back with version 2 of Spectacles, its sunglasses camera. This time around, they're water resistant, they take photos as well as videos, and the case is a lot smaller, so you're more likely to bring them around with you. Snapchat only sold about 220,000 pairs of its old spectacles because they were just kind of hard to have around. But even though they're still in a yellow, bright case, the case is a lot smaller. It's more like purse fitting. It doesn't quite fit in your pocket, but it's definitely easier to bring around. The case also charges the glasses 4 times. What you'll notice when you put on the glasses is that the little bump in the back where all of the hardware is housed is a lot smaller, making the glasses feel lighter and more natural. When you put them on, they're actually quite comfortable, and with the little touch of the button on this left side, you'll see that the white ring of lights comes on, signaling that you're recording. If you tap and hold, you can actually take a photo now instead of just a video when you tap once. Spectacles will now come in a much more natural set of colors, a deeper blue, a deeper red, and black, instead of those crazy teal pastel colors like last time. And that means you're a lot more likely to actually want to put them on your face. Snapchat has put a lot of work into fixing the pairing process that was really clumsy before. Instead of a QR code, now you just press and hold down on the button while in the pairing mode in your Snapchat app, and they instantly pair together. Now all you do is hit the import button, and it'll download all of your snaps off of your Spectacles over Wi-Fi. You can see here that the quality is pretty high and the downloads are happening very quickly, about 4 times quicker than the time it took to download HD from Spectacles version 1. Here you can see me riding a scooter along the pier in San Francisco. And Spectacles still shoot in that circular format, so no matter which way you turn your phone, it's always full screen. Spectacles claim that they can last almost a week with regular usage, and you won't have to download all of your snaps to your phone until after. And that makes it nice because you can leave your phone at home and just travel around with your specs. That's great if you're going to the beach or somewhere wet where you might not want to get your phone wet, but the Spectacles can actually take video and photos underwater. You don't want to dive to 200 meters like a diving watch allows, but going a few feet under the water is no problem. Because Spectacles don't have that yellow ring right here, it's a lot harder to tell that they are actually cameras. Nobody when I was riding around seemed to notice that I actually was recording video of them. And that could be a problem for Snapchat. It managed to avoid most of the creepy privacy issues that plagued Google Glass in its first few years because people always knew that you were wearing camera glasses. There's nothing super revolutionary about version 2 of Spectacles, but they improve on so many of the pain points from V1 that I do expect them to sell better, people to record more content because they actually keep them with them, and for them to help Snapchat, maybe not just in the business side, but actually to get more interesting content onto the app that you're not going to see on places like Instagram. Spectacles version 2 go on sale on April 26th in the US, UK, Canada, and France, and will be available in 12 more countries in a week or so. They're $150, and they're only available through Snapchat's website and app. No more of those Snapbot vending machines for now. But luckily, even if you just have V1, Snapchat is going to push a firmware update so that everybody can take photos with their Spectacles, not just V2 users. As long as the company doesn't endure a bunch of privacy scandals because people don't realize that they're a camera since they removed that yellow ring, I think these could be a big leap forward for Snapchat's hardware efforts.
Earlier this year, Apple released the iMac Pro, a thoughtfully built machine aimed at creative professionals. They sent us a mid-tier 10-core model to test out video editing. As video producers at TechCrunch, we don't always have the luxury of 2-week deadlines. Edits are often banged out right after the shoot. To be honest, listing off the latest specs won't impress us. What we need to know is, can we simultaneously run Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, and have 20 Chrome windows open without bogging down the machine? Will rendering complete before I can run down to Farolito and grab a burrito? My name is Tito. In other words, can the price of upgrading be justified? The machine's design is clean and minimal. Basically, what you'd expect from Apple. The Magic Keyboard feels like every Apple keyboard from the past few years, except that it's space gray with black keys. Fancy. It's decent, solid, there's really nothing else to say. The Magic Mouse 2 handles well on a variety of surfaces, and the built-in gesture make it easy to switch back and forth from a laptop trackpad, but depending on your workflow, you might want the $50 upgrade for a Magic Trackpad 2. The Lightning charging port for the Magic Mouse 2 is at the bottom. You can't use it while recharging the battery. It's a little annoying, but not a big deal. The keyboard and mouse lasts about 2 weeks of heavy use before it needs to be charged. The FaceTime camera has been upgraded to 1080p, which means you'll look great on everyone else's devices, but what you see depends on their camera quality, and if I'm FaceTiming you with my shitty 2014 MacBook Pro, it's not gonna look too good, but man, do I look good in real life, but not really. The audio quality was surprisingly good, which is a plus for video bloggers. On the back, there's a 3.5mm headphone jack, SD card slot, 4 USB 3, 4 Thunderbolt 3, and an Ethernet port. We found use for all the ports except for the Thunderbolt 3. I have a Drobo plugged into one of the Thunderbolt 3 ports, but can't find a use for the other 3 since most USB-C devices have a USB 3 connection on the other end. We're going to assume the 4 ports is Apple's preparation for when Thunderbolt 3 replaces USB 3 as the standard, since they're all about that future-proofing. Editing in Premiere Pro was ridiculously fluid. There was no latency when switching between the Ripple, Razor, and Pen tools. Exporting a sequence while editing a gallery of CR2 files in Lightroom and jumping from one program to the next didn't slow down the system. The loudest the internal fan spins during heavy-duty processing was a faint hum. We ran some tests between the iMac Pro and the 2014 MacBook Pro, which most of us are working on, and it's super duper fast. Yeah, fast as fuck. Performance-wise, we have no major gripes. In fact, the 10-core configuration Apple sent us outstrips our needs for basic 1080p video editing. It's better suited for heavy-duty motion graphics, 3D modeling, and feature-length films shot on 4K. The $5,000 base model would have probably been more than sufficient, and the highest configuration at $13,000 would have been overkill. But at this price point, who is the iMac Pro really for? As sweet as this machine is, there is no way I can justify a $10,000 price tag to my corporate overlords. A crap load of our production friends have switched over to PCs because of Apple's lack of configuration capabilities. You can build the same specs for 1/3 the cost. Those running production companies won't spend that much with so many employees. Who is it for then? The iMac Pro is for a niche market within the already niche market of creative professionals, the ones who are willing to spend the extra few thousand for aesthetics. Still, after a month with the Kobe beef of computers, only to revert back to a steamed White Castle patty of a laptop, it's a little sad to have to send it back. Hey everybody, remember to give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and please subscribe. All right, see you next time. This video is not sponsored, so don't tell me it's sponsored. It's not. Okay, bye.
Is there anything you can't ship?
Well, pretty much we use bicycles and motorbikes, so the size, we're limited on size, and obviously anything illegal is not allowed.
Fridge?
A fridge, not yet, not yet.
All right, sounds good. What does Glovo do? A lot of people in the States don't actually know.
And we pretty much bring anything you want within your city in a question of minutes, around 30 minutes. Our Glovers, those are the couriers, they'll go and buy anything from any store or restaurant and bring it to you through our app.
So I worry that we did this back in 1999. What changed that lets you do this now here in Barcelona, and especially in all the cities that you're in now?
Well, I think the world's mobile now, and that's the big difference. That you have an app, and everybody has one, a mobile phone, and literally you can, order anything you want.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about the team and some of the cities that you're attacking right now?
Glovo's headquarters in Barcelona. We have local teams in each of the countries that we've launched in. So we'll have satellite offices in Paris, Milan, in Portugal, and now in Latin America. In terms of software development, we do all of it in-house. So we bring in the best engineers and designers from around the world, really, to work on this product.
So what's the hardest thing about designing for a global audience?
It's really easy to fall into the trap of building out features that are only applicable to one or two markets. One of our core design principles is always build out features that we know we can deliver across multiple markets, of course adjusting them as they go.
It's not a small startup, but it is a fairly small startup in a European city. What are you guys worried about in terms of competition?
Well, I mean, I think we've got to be key to, focus on our plan, which is pretty much delivering anything. That's our big differentiator. In Europe, we don't have a major competitor in that space. There's a lot of companies that specialize on food delivery. We also do that. We'll bring, food from the best restaurants in the city, but we also bring from any store or pick up anything. So as long as we're focused on that and executing well, we'll have the early mover advantage. So I think we're pretty confident that we're doing things well.
Okay. Do you guys ever go to stores anymore, or are you just Glovo everything?
I Glovo everything. I think that's
Don't you miss going to a restaurant?
Babbel is the top-grossing language learning app in all app stores worldwide. You can learn basically anywhere, anytime. Online language learning.
Digital language learning, we don't divide it so much. I think language learning is language learning, and we happen to be started in the digital space. So we started out with a web version that was back in 2007, so had quite a lot of technology shifts from Flash to HTML to mobile. So we went through quite a lot of different changes.
And so that means that you're just coming up on your 10th anniversary now.
Absolutely, we had a fantastic party to celebrate the 10 years anniversary. When we started, we always wanted to build a product for everyone. My mom, myself, anyone who would be at least interested in language learning in the first place.
How does your platform differ from the other ones that are out there, or what has been available?
We're using all the research that's been out there in the language learning field since a couple of hundred years, and we figured out how to put that into an online digital mobile experience with a focus on communicative settings. So our first lessons always are around like introducing yourself, saying hi, saying bye, ordering something at the restaurant. I think it's very practical, and that's probably the difference to many other solutions out there that have a very structural approach. We're always focused on language that you can actually use in your real life.
And now you're expanding to the US. That's been a big focus this year. How does the US differ?
One of the ways the US obviously is different, no one needs to learn Spanish for their job. So like a biggest driver that we see all over Europe is to improve your English for your career. That's basically non-existent in the US. But US is our second biggest country overall within Bubble, and it's growing north of 100% this year alone. So pretty good.
What's up, Tech Crunchers? We are at Skydio HQ, where we're going to chat with a group of startup employees who are building autonomous drones that can track your every move. We're going to chat with their CEO and see what they're up to. Let's check them out.
The basic idea for what we're doing is we think fully autonomous drones are really the future of the industry. And we've believed that from the beginning, and we've also believed that the core technology and the core enabler there is the software system. So we've really been focused on building that from the very beginning.
So I'm seeing kind of a lot of prototypes behind us. You want to just kind of give a long overview, kind of stretching through the process of where this idea started, translating into your new product, the R1.
For almost the first year of the company, it was just my 3 co-founders working in a basement, self-funded. So the prototyping at that stage was very, very scrappy. So we started with just off-the-shelf quadcopter frames and putting media center computers and USB cameras on them, and essentially starting the core of our software system. And there's been a pretty steady evolution since then to get to the R1. So we built more sophisticated rigs that let us have multiple cameras to develop more and more of the software. And then at a certain point, when we had kind of answered enough of the questions there about what was going to be possible, what we really wanted the product to be, we started developing the custom hardware platform. And the basic idea there has been pretty constant from the beginning, but we've been through a number of iterations to get everything dialed in just the way that we want for R1. So we started this first prototype, AirCam 1, aptly named, was using basically a media center computer, which was not very power efficient, not at all designed for this. The cameras are plugged in over USB. So there was a lot that was not great about this, but it allowed us to get something in the air and start developing the software system. And then I think we're just fortunate to kind of be doing this at the right time. So after we started the company, NVIDIA announced the TX1, these sort of perfect embedded compute modules that have really powerful GPUs, and that's what we started using. So we did the sort of off-the-shelf computer thing for a little while, and then started working on NVIDIA dev boards.
What's up with this monster? How's this one
doing? This is a team favorite.
the prettiest of the bunch.
This is the triangle rig, is what we called it.
Okay.
So this is when we had one prototype engineer who was awesome, and he designed this kind of superstructure, but it's still fairly clunky. But this was the first thing we built that had multiple cameras kind of facing in every direction.
Okay.
So this was the first prototype that was basically all our custom hardware. So you can see the form factor is pretty close there.
Sure.
It's not exactly the final thing, but this is pretty close to, all the big ideas were in play, and this is pretty much all our final custom electronics.
Was 6 pairs of cameras pretty much like, that was at least what you had to hit for the most part in your mind from the beginning?
Yeah, that was a fairly early design decision. Like we wanted, the key thing that we had in mind for basically every product decision is we wanted trustworthy autonomy. We wanted you to be able to trust the device to fly itself without you needing to pay too much attention to it. And we felt that one of the real keys, one of the real building blocks to making that happen was having stereo pairs looking in every direction, which has a bunch of other challenges associated with it. Like that's one of the reasons why we developed this this perimeter structure out of composites to hold all the cameras in the configuration that we needed, and be super rigid.
Yeah, yeah. I was curious about that. Was it a decision from the beginning not to make like the wings fold or anything? Because I know there's some drones that have a similar form factor that fold up.
Yeah, so it's something that we explored, but we thought that this was going to be like a superior product experience. It still fits into your backpack, and it doesn't have the added complexity and weight of folding, which, especially for having the cameras around the outside, just wouldn't really solve.
Cool. So around the launch, a lot of people were talking about the cameras, kind of the self-flying selfie cam, which for a $2,500 product, like I think that you can see a lot more potential in what the one-liner about it could be. So as you kind of look to the future, are you a selfie cam company? Like what how do you characterize it?
We probably have like a mixed relationship with the word selfie. I mean, I think that if you just think about cameras in general, like first of all, cameras are just everywhere in our lives, right? Every smartphone has one. Actually, every smartphone has at least 2 now. Some have more. The major use case for phones is taking pictures. Most social media is driven by people taking and sharing pictures and video. So cameras, pictures, video are just like a core part of our existence now, and it's becoming more central. And then if you think about like what are people taking pictures and video of, most pictures and video gets taken of people. Like people are the most interesting subjects.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want, really, but we think of this as just like another sort of evolution of the camera. It's a camera that understands the scene it's looking at and has the ability to move itself. And our first use case is targeted around capturing amazing content of people doing cool stuff that you would otherwise not be able to get. When people take pictures of themselves now, almost by definition, they're not doing anything interesting because they have the ability to like stand there and pose, or their buddy is holding the camera. Whereas this thing allows you to like capture the stuff that you're most excited about without having to think or worry about it. It's hard to say what the category is going to be called in the long term, but we think it's a real thing and it's going to be pretty big. And the kind of like consumer market questions. That's not a drill. That's a prototype. That's a R1 that's strapped down.
The R1 with the Hailfire integration.
A lot of these things sort of look like drone torture chambers where we have the thing like strapped down and then beat it up.
Got to do that testing.
Aira is, it's spelled A-I-R-A, and it is a company that provides access to instant information for people who are visually impaired. So we are using a pair of glasses that is connected to a smartphone that we have an Aira app on the smartphone. And what you do is you basically put the glasses on your face and you're able to link up with a network of live human agents that are around the country. And these agents are all trained. They all go through a really strict screening process to go through how to help direct a blind person or a visually impaired person, how to describe things. And every visually impaired person who's an Aira Explorer is what we call them, they have a profile that allows them to kind of illustrate how much description they like. So some people, for example, want a ton of description, really detailed information about colors and designs and everything else. And some people just really want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible and want limited, descriptions. And so whenever the Aira agent picks up that call, what they see on their dashboard on the screen is the video that's coming out of the glasses. They see who the Aira Explorer is, they see their profile and all that information, but they also see things like the Google map that's pinpointing the GPS location of the Aira Explorer. They see things like points of interest that are nearby. And they could even click on those points of interest to get things like menus at a restaurant. So for example, if I was saying, hey, I wanted to go to this restaurant, they could direct me on how to get to that restaurant if I was walking, but they could also on the way read me the menu so that when I got to that restaurant, I'd be able to know exactly what I wanted and what was available to me on that menu.
So Aira launched this past year. What would you say is the most common use case for the users?
There's a lot of people who use it for reading different items. So for example, sorting through mail is a constant frustration. Paper mail for me is like, it's annoying.
Annoying for everybody.
Yeah,
More,
seriously.
More so.
But doing a lot of mail filtering, some people use it a little bit more extensively for a lot of reading tasks. There is a lot of navigation. I've always been referred to as the airport guy because I do a lot of travel for my job, and so I absolutely love it in airports, and that's something that we're really we have a huge initiative for because we believe that Aira is something that should be available at every single airport around the country and the world.
Well, it definitely sounds like you're up to some great work. Greg, thanks so much for showing us.
Hey, thanks, Lucas.
About 4 years ago, Fetch started. We kind of came into the market with a big vision, a long-term vision of not only transporting goods with a mobile robot, but eventually doing picking with the robot. And for the last 3 years, we've really focused on the mobile part of it, being able to move pieces, cases, and pallets. That means we have a 100-kilogram robot, a 500-kilogram robot, and a 1,500-kilogram payload robot. And all of this basically creates a suite of options for our customers to pick and choose and mix and match, because we have different modules that go on top, to really provide an end-to-end solution across multiple business units. We built the hardware as a platform so that we could build different accessories on top of it. So we have different modules. We have a RFID module that allows you to find inventory in a facility. And we have one that's just a fixed shelf, and that's used for moving goods around. But we also have newer accessories like putting a conveyor top on top of the robot. We call it a roller top. And then a cart attaching device so you can move carts around in your facility. And then we eventually made two large robot platforms, the 500 and the 1500. The robots have their own onboard intelligence, which helps them avoid obstacles and things like that. But all of the cloud robotics software that we've built basically allows us to deploy systems to customers in less than 8 hours and allows them to configure it without knowing anything about robotics. Amazon Prime has really ratcheted up the market, fiercity for getting product to people very fast, and that has a lot of implications on how much labor you need, how fast that labor needs to be able to provide units per hour to ship out. And so there were a lot of market factors that really made manufacturing and warehousing an ideal market for robotics. And like I said, the problem is solvable. It's what robotics called the semi-structured environment. You kind of know what it looks like, you kind of know what all the factors are, and then the people inside that environment are financially incentivized to behave themselves. So if you have a robot driving around, no one's going to jump out in front of it and say, "Hey robot, did you find me?" or do things like that. And so it's really an ideal area to deploy right now. Manufacturing and warehousing just looked like a really tractable problem from a robotics perspective, but there were a lot of other strong market indicators that drove us towards it, like a labor shortage. I know everyone talks about robots and jobs, but there's a massive labor shortage in warehousing and manufacturing. There's about 600,000 unfilled positions. If you go to any conference today for material handling and logistics, all you're going to hear is, "I can't find enough people to do the jobs." It's the #1 factor that people talk about when it comes to robots and jobs or just labor in general.
This robot is going to water my garden. How?
So it uses technology we borrowed from agricultural research, and we've combined it with useful automation to help everyday people grow food at home. It's designed to be left outside in the garden and grow for years. So it's solar powered, runs on the same energy as the plants, sun comes up, powers the unit, starts working. So it uses a camera, a thermal sensor, and other visual sensors to look at the garden, to assess if the plants are healthy, if they're water stressed. Then it's able to feed that data to you, but also take action in the garden, automatically water your plants, and also protect it from pests such as deer or possums or even your neighbor's cat.
Or maybe rabbits.
Yes.
What about watering the garden itself? How accurate is it in watering the plants?
So it's reasonably accurate. It looks at the plant's water stress, so it makes sure that a plant actually needs a drink before it gives it, but it also compares it to weather data, makes sure that it's not going to rain tomorrow, so everything's always kept in an optimal level of, well watered and growing.
So what sort of data can you get out of it, and are you taking the data and doing something with that?
Absolutely. So we collect a lot of data from the photos and the different measurements that we get from the sensory kit, and then we look at that and we assess what to do in the garden, but we also upload that to a data catalog, and we're able to make every garden space smarter based on what's happening all around the world with other garden space units.
What's next for the Garden Spaces robot?
So Garden Space wants to be the world's biggest food producer without owning a farm. So what's next for us is getting tens of thousands of units out there in people's backyards, have them growing food and producing an enormous amount and benefiting not only themselves, but our environment.
Every time you read about robotic AI threatening the world, there's a picture of a Boston Dynamic Atlas. It's more likely that the threat looks more like a laptop than an atlas. We want to break the boundaries of understanding robotics as these sort of sentient autonomous things and think about them in ways that we don't think of humans and animals. Playground is really about understanding robotics in that collaborative, distributed mode and think of their minds not as individual entities, but a collective robot mind that shares sensing and actuation in different physical forms. We tend not to look for short-term returns. In VC, you have to do something which is almost certainly wrong, because otherwise everybody else will do it. So the real opportunities are somewhere between the unlikely and the impossible. We are looking for things that are deep technologies which are durable and defensible, but also achievable. Robotics is really in its infancy for some of these scale applications. What's missing has been the link between what are now tour de force controls and physical systems with the intelligence and perception to make them useful. What makes them investable opportunities and what makes them big companies is blending the intelligence and this new kind of distributed intelligence with these tour de force mechanical devices. Robotics can really change the economics of growing and collecting food. I think that's a very large-scale market. A lot of people will point to autonomous vehicles, which I think will have a large economic impact. We're starting to see robots that can operate in human unstructured environments, things like the agility robotics, Cassie, that you may have seen. So there'll be, I think, new kinds of industries and new kinds of wealth created by more and more of these capable robots in environments that we simply don't imagine them in today. In order to get the behaviors that make these robots capable of doing things they don't do today, they need to be able to share representations of knowledge and experience in an intimate way. They need to be safe. They need to be able to communicate securely. They need to be able to use state-of-the-art perception and science. And we think all of those things incorporated into a platform will allow our investments to put their capital into the things they're domain experts in and into the applications that we're funding them for. So we think we'll drive these robots into markets to do things we haven't seen. And I think as they become more and more connected to one another, and as they collaborate on what they're learning and what they're thinking about, we'll find more uses for these things above and beyond what are imagined as robotics applications.
I'm Carsten Becker. I'm the head of electronics at PT Scientists, and we're a private company working on the first commercial missions to the moon.
You're creating a lunar lander and a rover.
Yes.
Isn't that expensive? Like, where's the money coming from?
So in the beginning, this was really a lot of private funding and small investors. We caught the interest of Audi. They wanted to support something very innovative and challenge their engineers to think about problems they never have faced before. For example, if every kilogram that we're able to shave off the rover, or any hardware essentially, is worth millions. And so Audi was helping us to reduce the weight from the third generation rover, which was weighing about 45 kilograms, down to 35 kilograms. If you're into math, then you will find out that this translates into 20 million euros of potential payload that we can sell.
And this is all in service of possibly in the future, having more missions, colonies, things like that. This is all interesting science that can be done towards that goal, right?
Yeah, so for example, if you want to build a moon village, as the head of the European Space Agency calls it, you want to know which materials you want to use. One of the most important questions is, can we use duct tape and other materials? How long does the MLI, the blankets, last? And so those are very interesting questions that can be answered from taking a look at what is standing on the moon for 45 years now. We have built a lot of hardware, but it's not like many people imagine that you're working on parts all the time. So you're ordering and then you put it together. But actually, it's a lot of engineering, and 2 or 3 months you put it together and then you qualify it and off you go.
This is another interesting part of the testing, is that obviously if you're making a rover, you have to be able to test it on something that's like lunar regolith, and that's what we have here, the regolith.
Yeah, so what's really cool about this part is it's not just some sand that we stole from a beach. This is what you will find below the first layer of dust.
One of the lightweight innovations you guys have come up with is these amazing tires, if you can really call them that. This is all hardware. It's incredibly light. And so is this like machined aluminum or something like that?
So this is 3D printed aluminum.
Oh, is it sintered?
Yes, exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's really cool stuff because it's extremely sturdy, extremely lightweight. And the best part is it's just one part. It's unlike the wheels we had before, which were a bit smaller. They were made from different parts that had to be screwed together. So you're eliminating points of failure, you're reducing the weight, and yeah, also pretty cool stuff.
In your sort of mission statement, you talk about both making space more accessible and using reusable parts and off-the-shelf parts. How much can really be off the shelf? What do you mean by reusable? And it still sounds like it costs millions of dollars, so how is it more accessible?
We use a lot of components off the shelf, which is something that is not very likely to be seen in other space missions. And the reason why we are getting away with this is because our mission is quite short. Essentially, our mission could be done in as quickly as 2 weeks. And this is why we get away with using automotive parts or industrial-grade components.
They're not meant to last for like 500 miles in 3 years.
Exactly, yes.
How close are you to actually putting together a working lander with rovers built in and everything?
So the goal is to launch at about the third quarter of 2019.
SPART is a human resilience platform that we started to really reduce injury risk using analytics and hardware, a force plate. And that force plate measures how much force, pressure is put in the ground in different directions. And from that pattern, we've been able to both identify and predict and subsequently reduce injuries, initially in athletes. Then we moved into the military and now moving towards medicine. Most of what we do is dictated by how our feet interact with the ground. So we use a jump. And actually from that jump test, the force in the ground, that pattern, we've been able to standardize through software, and that's what allows us to predict injuries to the upper body. There's a lot of balance tests that are out there, and force plates, the hardware we use have been around for decades. And so it's really the data science that's really allowed us to provide something unique. We're looking for somebody that can make us better and not just, provide us capital. And so Playground's expertise, particularly within hardware, was something that really, appealed to us. And so that was the reason why we started a relationship with Playground.
The company started with 4 graduate students, with Professor Castelloni, that's 5 founders. And we worked on primarily the medical exoskeleton. And he kind of convinced us to stay around to start this company together. and gradually evolved into industrial, and now we have a recreational and a defense exoskeleton. On the medical side, we have a device right now primarily for paraplegics, so allow them to stand up and walk. That's primarily for reducing the risk of secondary injuries. That's very damaging for the body and very costly. We really focus on simplicity right from the beginning and affordability, driving the cost down so more people can have access to these devices. If you have a really good device that costs $100,000, not a lot of people can have access to them. In terms of on the industrial side, we're focusing primarily on back injuries, shoulder injuries, and leg injuries. Let's say for the back X. It's designed to essentially support the weight of the user's upper body and whatever weight he's holding when he's in a stoop position, bending over, picking up an object, transfer that weight through the exoskeleton frame, through a torsionator, and transfer it to the legs, bypassing injury-prone back muscles. By that, reduce fatigue-related injuries. It's extremely difficult to make a lightweight device that doesn't impede the user. So a lot of our focus is really making it lightweight, doesn't generate a lot of heat, and only assist the user when necessary. We found out really early on that if the worker is impeding anyway, they won't want to wear it. They will take it off within the first 5 minutes. Recently, we've been running clinical trials, so we're getting a lot more people coming in to try the devices. It's always extremely rewarding to see them being able to stand up and walk, and their comments, it's just, like revitalize everyone here, boost the morale. It's like just really good to see the response, and the type of work that we do can really impact people's lives.
A big part of what we're interested in is how learning can enable robots to act intelligently in very complex and unstructured environments. Robots are really good at essentially doing the same thing over and over again. This is basically how robotics has been for several decades. When it comes to robots going out into unstructured environments like your home or an office or a hospital, there all sorts of unpredictable things might happen. And I think that learning will be a crucial component for making that possible for robots, because then robots can actually learn from their experience, acquire a kind of common sense, and use that to act intelligently when things happen in the real world they didn't quite expect. So we might have a setting, for instance, where we've already collected a lot of data. Maybe the robot has picked up thousands of objects, or it's pushed around thousands of objects, and it can use that to get started. But in order for this technology to really be very powerful, to really enable intelligent behavior in any real-world environment, then we need the robot to be able to continuously improve from its own experience.
What we can see here is a visual model predictive control. The idea is that you have a robot interacting autonomously with the environment, collecting data by pushing around objects. And then you can train a video prediction model that can predict the future images based on an action sequence. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to select a point in the image and select a goal point where I want to have this object pushed. And now what is happening is that our algorithm samples a large number of action sequences, and then for every of those action sequences predicts where the pixel is ending up that I clicked on, as you can see on the right in the video. And yeah, now it applies the optimal action sequence to the robot and successfully pushes the object to the goal.
So that's, I think, where we really need to be headed, where the mode of supervision is such that the robot can acquire it autonomously without necessarily requiring human intervention for every single thing that it learns.
So the goal of this research was to have a robot be able to learn from videos of humans doing tasks. And the way that we had it do that was it actually was using what's called meta-learning, or learning to learn. So here's that demonstration. The demonstration looks good. Now let's give the apple to the robot, and we can shuffle around the objects. And then the robot now needs to try to figure out, just from the video of the human, the video that I gave it, how to accomplish the task. So we can see here that it's figured out that it needs to place into the blue bowl, and it's lowering the object into the bowl.
So that's a mode of demonstration, a way of specifying tasks for a robot that's much more intuitive, I think, for normal people to do, people who are not robotics experts. We'd like to be doing things that are actually making a difference in the world, that have commercial implications, but that also are helping make people's lives better. But in the long term, I think that looking at things that are actually relevant for real-world problems serves as a very good signpost to make sure that you're studying the right scientific question. Because if we want to create robotic systems that are capable, intelligent, that can reason about complex situations, we need to actually be pushing ourselves to get things into realistic settings. If we do everything kind of in video game worlds and in little simulator worlds, we might do a really great
Ladies
job
and
of
gentlemen,
those
please
in real
take your
world,
seats.
but not really make a big
The program will
impact on
begin in 5 minutes.
The Yield is an ag tech startup organisation that takes the guesswork out of growing for growers. They usually are taking weather information from stations that are 2,500 kilometres away from their actual climate. So we're looking at putting on-farm weather sensing that then gives them microclimate information so they can have more accurate information. But the other piece of it is that we're not just giving them the data, we're actually giving them information at the right time when they require it to make the decisions.
We collect everything a weather station could give us, which includes barometric pressure, wind speed, temperature, soil humidity, leaf wetness, and also soil radiation. So essentially this hardware which stays in the field collects all the information using 8 different sensors that we feed to our data models and run our predictions. We are the only company that has a product in the market that is an end-to-end solution that includes hardware and software platform. We use industry sensors from third-party companies. We don't build the sensors ourselves.